Hello everyone, this is Cindy from Myalism Films, and today we'll be talking about two of my favorite apps, one for filming and one for editing, FiLMiC Pro and KineMaster. I was supposed to record a completely different video today, but since winter decided to return, I had no choice but to, stay indoors and instead talk about two very cool apps that are, I think, essential to smartphone filmmaking. At least one of them is FiLMiC Pro. Why do I use FiLMiC Pro now? I'm sure that you've heard a lot of people in the smartphone filmmaking world talk about FiLMiC Pro and talk about how good it is and how helpful it is and how important it is to the filmmaking process in general. Back at the start of the pandemic last year, I decided to make a short smartphone film on my Samsung S9 using the native camera. It was a very basic horror short, but I wanted to see how far I can push the settings on my native camera. While my Samsung S9 has excellent video quality, I felt something was missing when I was looking back at the footage. No matter how many times I locked it, my auto exposure kept changing when I changed room to room between lighter and darker places. The image itself felt quite flat, but most importantly, it was missing that movie-like feeling. It had this very sharp digital look, and I desperately wanted to have the cinematic or movie-like look. So I did a very quick search and found FiLMiC Pro, and immediately after that I started exploring it and working with it and learning how all of the settings worked and basically filming pretty much everything that is on the channel. Now, I've talked about some of the mistakes that I've made using FiLMiC Pro and mostly how I wasn't setting up stuff correctly, how I wasn't using the settings as they should be used. So if you want to see that video, if you want to see how to avoid those mistakes, there will be a link in the description below and maybe somewhere on screen, so you click that if you have an interest in seeing some of the mistakes that you can make as a beginner smartphone filmmaker. To be fair, FiLMiC Pro is a very intuitive app. It's very easy to learn and it's very welcoming to beginners. So if you want to learn how to use it, all of the settings are here, all of the settings are available to you, so you can tinker with them, you can play with them, and you can learn as you go. So let me show you my favorite FiLMiC Pro settings, the ones that I most use and how I use them and why I use them as well. So first thing I check before hitting record is my frame rate and filming quality. I mostly film at 24 frames per second with a playback of 24 as well, but you can also set up a higher FPS and a lower playback, and that'll give you some slow-mo footage. You can easily experiment with the playback settings and just see how much of a slow-mo footage you'll get. For instance, if you are filming at 30 frames per second and you set your playback at 24, you get about 80% slower footage. To my knowledge, this is quite handy for night shoots when you're doing handheld instead of using a tripod or a gimbal. The second thing that I do is make sure that I lock my shutter speed at 148, and I try to keep my ISO as low as possible. But why do you want to do that? Why do you need to do that? Well, the reason is pretty simple. Smartphones are not exactly optimized for low light and for bright daylight. When you're filming in darker places, you want to keep your ISO as low as possible to reduce the amount of noise and artifacts in your footage. Kind of the same goes when you film in very bright daylight, but in this case you need one more thing to achieve that: an ND filter. The easiest way to explain what an ND filter is to think of it as sunglasses for your camera. You hear a lot of people say that, and it's true. The moment you put it on your camera lens, you basically reduce the amount of brightness, the amount of light. The next thing that I do is I select 4K each time that I shoot a smartphone film. So you film at a higher quality, and then when you edit and when you export your footage, you can lower that to 180p without fear of losing really any quality to your image, so you still keep that nice footage that you shot. FiLMiC allows a variety in terms of aspect ratios. I do shoot at 16:9 for one main reason really, and that's a bit of a reference to my second app here. KineMaster behaves the best with 16:9 footage. That's it. It's as simple as that. But you can see here that as I switch to each one of these, the footage in the background changes, like the black bars at the top and bottom of the screen change their size. what I do is I go over here to this setting. So this is my white balance, and this is something else that you need to choose or lock. FiLMic's white balance setting is great because for the most part it does the job on its own. So I usually lock it and let it figure out things. To my experience, I think it's best to lock it and leave FiLMiC do its thing because it does a great job at figuring out things. Now that we have everything locked and secured, it's time to play around with the focus wheel as well. Over here on the right side of the screen, you'll be able to see the focus wheel and these 3 white dashes on it. So these are your focus points, they're the focus point lines. And what you can do is set each one of them and lock them to a specific place. So now your focus wheel is going to move from point A to point B. And what that means is if you've locked your focus and have your subject out of focus, the moment you tap the focus wheel, the moment you tap this small white arrow here, the focus wheel is going to shift and now your subject is going to be, or object is going to be in focus. And you can adjust the speed as well. You can set your focus pull to be faster or slower. I prefer the slower speed. I prefer the smoother, slower pull. So I set it between 3 and 4. And this is particularly fun for me to use if I'm trying to figure out how my foreground, middle ground and background work in relation, or just my foreground and background. So it's really interesting for me that you are able to do this and you're able to see things this way. Basically what FiLMiC Pro allows you is to have a automated pull control for smooth pulling. And that's particularly helpful. You'll be able to see that as you work more and more with the FiLMiC Pro and with the focus wheel, that this is like a key factor to setting up your scenes. And on top of that, if you add your own motion to the footage and combine it with the focus pull, that delivers a very nice, very smooth, very like professional looking or cinematic looking footage. If I tap the focus pull at exactly the right moment, I'll have this nice, slow, smooth review of my character. And this is particularly interesting in a situation where you have 2 characters, for instance, talking, and then you can easily, just with one tap on your screen, shift the focus and now have the other character in focus. Now he's the important one, now he's closest to the camera, now he's in focus and the other one isn't. And this is why I think the focus wheel is particularly important, and it's a good thing to learn how to use it early on because it's going to come in handy quite a lot, and you want to use it, you want to have that nice separation between your foreground and your background, or between your middle ground and background. And as a closing line, I have to say I've been using FiLMiC Pro for about a year now. I'm using it right now to record this video as well. And despite the fact that I don't have like the best lighting here, I'm in a bit of a darker room. I do have like 3 lights shining right now, and they're not like enough to light anything pretty much. FiLMiC Pro is doing a fantastic job at giving me the best quality footage that I can get under the circumstances. So it's easy as this: setting up your phone on a tripod, opening FiLMiC Pro and just clicking record, and that's pretty much it. Moving on to KineMaster. I currently do all of my editing on my tablet, and before that I used to do it on my phone. Because I edit on a tablet, and because that tablet is an Android one, there are still limitations, and it's still a trial and error process to be able to find an app that you can use easy and that you can edit with. I've edited stuff with DJI Mimo, VN, Quik, YouCut, Filmora Go and more. Pretty much anything that's out there, and it's an Android friendly editing app. The DJI Mimo app and the Quik app, which is the GoPro one, have some really cool video templates that are preset, and you can select them and layer them over your footage, so the app itself will transform it to this very dynamic, very motion video. And this is perfect for like travel vlogs or for like B-roll footage. I used to use YouCut, which I still think is a fantastic app, and an app that will not only give you the basics but also sprinkle some really neat transitions, effects. And VN is a fantastic app as well. It doesn't have any watermarks. You can export at different aspect ratios, so you have a variety, like again with effects. It has a separate track for subtitles or any text, for music and for your video, so it's a little bit more well optimized. But what if you want to do something else? What if you want to do more and have more control over what you can do with your footage? This is maybe one of the reasons why I went back to KineMaster. I think in the past it felt like the best app out there to use for smartphone footage, or maybe it was the best app that worked with my device. To be able to use KineMaster to its best quality, I'm a premium user for the time being. You can still have access to the premium content, but you have to, watch ads. These here are my most used stickers and effects, at least for the past couple of projects. With the delivery, I experimented a lot more, and you can see how the timeline looks. All of these color blocks are either effects or stickers or text elements. I found that some of the effects have enabled me a lot to give my film the look that I felt it needed. It could be the smallest thing, but having some fog or rain or a cracked glass, a flickering light, just basic stuff can be enough if of course you manage to blend it into the scene. And obviously there are sound effects and music tracks as well, which won't get copyright claimed in YouTube if you use them. It's not a big selection, however, just like with the font options, but there are some hidden gems that might suit your film or B-roll or travel vlog, so do check those out as well. There are a ton of tutorials on YouTube, and in KineMaster's own YouTube channel they share quite a lot of videos to help you use the assets at the best possible way, or just give you some ideas on how you can combine assets. So I'll leave a link in the description below to their channel so you can check some of those options for yourself. Color grading in KineMaster is a bit interesting as well. The app doesn't allow LUT import, so you are stuck with whatever it offers natively, which isn't bad. There are a lot of filters at your disposal which you can adjust to your delight. I don't mess with those too much because this happens instead happening mostly when I tinker with the vibrance or the saturation. I don't know why, maybe it's something to do with my particular device, but if you know the whys in-house, do let me know. One thing I haven't used as much is the Chroma Key. So for all of you out there that are like using green screens, this is at your disposal. And I've heard even like before I started using KineMaster that their green screen, like their Chroma Key settings are really good. KineMaster's menu is also really cool. Here on the left side you have your layer options, so the media layers will be either videos or photos that you have already on your device, and below that is your effects, your stickers, your text, and your handwriting. So your handwriting you usually use to just like draw arrows and circles on screen, at least that's what I use them for, but I've seen people use the handwriting to just color, like mask with green or with blue portions of their screen, so that is pretty handy for that if you don't have like a green screen but you still want to have this cool transition from like one location to the other location. You can use this option to just kind of paint the green screen onto your screen. And on the right here are your audio options, and below that you'll be able to see your sound effects. Not all of these are super crisp audio files, at least some of the ones that I've used haven't been. They are there again at your disposal, and I'm pretty sure they are going to play some value into like your film or your project. And below the sound effects you'll be able to find stuff you recorded, and below that it'll be songs that are already like available on your device. So just make sure that they are in the supported formats because otherwise you'll need to convert before you can use them. KineMaster enables you to either take photos or record videos with it. So if you have KineMaster on your phone, you'll be able to record and import the video directly onto the app by using the app. It's a pretty handy thing. You cannot control the frames per second or the quality within KineMaster, but because KineMaster uses the native camera on your phone or on your device, you'll get that quality. So if you tap on a video that's already in your timeline, you'll be able to see a bunch of different options. You have your basic like the trim and split. So if I click on the scissors here, you'll be able to see that I have like 4 options with how to split this video. I usually split at playhead. It's like the easiest way for me to like edit. You have your adjustment settings, so obviously here you'll be able to play around with like highlights and shadows, brightness, contrast. You have like gamma, lift, gain, all of the cool stuff. Volume envelope is also a handy thing if you need to have like a fade in and then a fade out at a different part in your video than the one that the like project option offers you. Now there are a bunch of different audio options in KineMaster that you can play around with. Reverb and voice changer definitely gives you something to think about and just to play around with and get creative with. I don't use them at all that much. I mostly use the loop one or loop to end. Now the loop one is going to loop your track indefinitely, and the loop to end is going to cut it to the length of your project file. The ducking option, I haven't had the chance to test it all that much. I haven't heard a significant difference when I've used it, but that's definitely up to you to see. You can extract your audio as well from your file if you needed to. If you need to like trim a specific section, or if you have a bit of a delay between your video and your audio, you can extract the audio and just readjust it manually, which I think is a very handy thing. It has happened a couple of times to me, so having this option and not having to go to a separate like website or a different app to like export the audio has been quite helpful. Keyframing is something that I've been using more and more recently. It basically works like any other keyframing that you'll find in any other video editing app. It can be a bit fiddly on a tablet, I have to admit that, but the KineMaster one is really easy to use. Basically, you have just two options. You can either add a keyframe like a key point or remove that, and you'll be able to see on your previews how that looks. I did that in the delivery over here with this sparkly purple electricity type of effect. This is all keyframe to stay inside this glass box. You can kind of see that it's not like the perfect keyframing, but for the effect and for what the shot was, I think it worked. KineMaster allows you to be, I think, as precise as you can on an app like this with keyframing. It does take some patience to work with it. It does take some getting used to it, just some practice to get it right and to kind of measure your keyframe points. Okay, if you see here on the demo with this tiny green alien, I can easily make it go around the Funko doll's head, but if we want to do something more complex than that, it's definitely going to take a lot more work and a lot more practice and definitely a lot more time. But all that being said, I think the KineMaster keyframing setting allows you a lot of freedom. The pan and zoom setting in KineMaster, which is located here between the scissors and the volume envelope at the top of your app, I found to be really helpful. Because I often find myself when I'm editing a project that I kind of need to crop a particular scene. Like here, for this scene in the delivery, this is how it originally looked like. I wanted the shot to be from over the shoulder, from over my shoulder, and to focus on Nikki alone, and kind of have this other person be almost invisible in the shot. And pan and zoom allowed me to do exactly that. And you can see here how the pan and zoom has changed the scene, that the shot is now over my shoulder and focuses on Nikki. And I think that's quite handy to have. And especially when you shoot at 4K, it's a lot easier to use this setting. One cool thing, and I think it's fairly new as an option in KineMaster, is that you can create a project, import a file, or duplicate a project in different aspect ratios, so you're not limited to the 16:9 one, and you have the freedom to export your files like in different formats as well. One downside to this is that some of the effects in KineMaster don't work with the different aspect ratios yet. And if you find yourself in this situation, what you can do is go to the sticker assets in KineMaster and find the cinematic frames package and download it. What this offers you is a variety of black bars that you can layer over your footage, and they'll appear at the top and bottom of your screen, simulating the real thing. This asset has saved me a few times already. Some of the smartphone films that are on the channel have been shot at 16:9, but I still wanted to have the filmic look, so I used this sticker. Now, the fact that KineMaster allows you to export at a bunch of different frame rates, I think it's fantastic. I think it's great. Not a lot of apps allow you to do that, or at least they don't allow you to go as low as 12 frames per second. KineMaster here just shows me like 60 as the top option to export at that frame rate, but I think if you go to the advanced settings, you can tell KineMaster to allow 120 frames or even 240 frames per second to be an option for import and export of files. For each of the advanced and experimental settings in KineMaster, and that's a clever way to name them, experimental, KineMaster is going to give you a warning of what might happen if you choose to enable this setting. So each time you tap any of these, it's just going to give you this pop-up warning that you can obviously click continue anyway and deal with the damage if that happens after that. For this footage here, because I have locked my shutter speed in 1/60, I can easily export this at 30 frames per second, or I can export it at 60 frames per second as well, but I'll select 2K and I'll call it a day, because I know that the quality of the footage is still going to be pretty decent. I won't go as low as 720p. I might export to 180p if I decide that the size of my footage is too big and that YouTube is going to process it for a long time, or maybe I don't have enough space on my device. Here at the bottom of the screen, KineMaster tells you how big your file is going to be if you decide to export with the selected settings, and it also shows you how much free space you have on your device, which is a neat thing because I never know how much space I have on my device. And this is going to always vary, and it's always going to depend on how long your footage is, how much effects it has. That's going to define how big of a file size you're going to get in the end. So, is an app like FiLMiC Pro enough to enable you to produce smartphone films? Definitely, absolutely. I can definitely say for myself that FiLMiC Pro has helped quite a lot with creating smartphone films, with my productivity. And I definitely do recommend it as an app, but this is not like a paid thing or a sponsored thing or anything like that. I'm just a regular user. Apps like FiLMiC Pro enable you to be better and to learn and to grow as a creator, and apps like KineMaster allow you to learn how to edit and how all of the different elements relate to each other and how they help you to tell a story. So can you start with your native camera and your editing software that's already on your phone? Definitely. As long as you take the step, go out there and hit record. If you enjoyed this video or learned something from it, give it a like, hit subscribe, or swing over by Twitter and say hello at Myalism Films. See you next time!